What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Hopefully everything is going good in your life. So what I'm going to do today, I decided to, off the fly, I had a little extra time and I wanted to do something productive. I wanted to offer my marriage experience to the group. I've been wanting to do this, so this is no better time than the present, right? So I'm waiting for a couple of people to pop in. Well, we got one. There we go. I'm going to wait for a few more people to pop in before I actually get into the conversation. So good morning. And just so you guys know, your names are popping up. For example, right here, it says, "Good morning, bro." I don't know who that is. Facebook won't allow the StreamYard to see your name. So if you want, at the top of the post I made on the Woke Christian Talk group, there's a link, Facebook. And if you just click that link and you allow it permission, I'll be able to see who it is that's asking the question. Only if you want to. You don't have to. One Facebook user I know, I don't even have to see the name, is Little Georgior, because only one person calls me Little Georgior, and that's Waywo. So thank you. So what I'm going to do today is really laid back, really easy, nothing super serious. Well, I guess it is kind of serious. Shout out to Roxby. Make sure you guys let everybody in the group know that this is going on. I think it's going to be valuable. I'm not in a rush. I don't have a time limit. I'm willing to answer any and every question. You can ask me personal questions about my own marriage and things like that. Now, I dropped a question in the chat a little earlier in the Woke Christians Talk Relationship group. And this was the question. I said, okay, I think it's time I contribute to this group since I have some time today. Give me 20 questions about marriage in the comments and I will answer them in a live video in this group. No question is off limits. Also, I'm answering off the cuff, right? I think it's better to answer these type of questions without a whole bunch of preparation. So shout out to you, Roxby, and Waywo, who provided a majority, if not all, the questions. So I'm happy about that. So it looks like we got 5 people in here. That's good. Okay, so let's get started. I'm thinking maybe I should work in reverse. I don't know. We'll see. Let me see. Okay. You know what? No, we're going to work from the top to bottom. Again, and you know what to help? I don't know if you guys are able to. If you're able to, go ahead and copy and paste the comments into this live stream. It makes it easier for me to look at because I have, these multiple screens open. But okay, here we go. Shout out to Shawnee Miller. Thank you. Welcome. Glad you're here. Okay, here we go. So the first question was from Roxby. She says, "I keep thinking about conflict and how to deal with it. The small arguments that pop up due to being in a bad mood or a misunderstanding. And then I think I already know what I'm supposed to do. If I'm the cranky one, then I need to apologize to my spouse. Or if I'm the one receiving the crankiness, then I need to be quick to forgive my spouse, even if they don't apologize, though I hope they do. What kinds of conversations should be had about conflict, such as dealing with it, learning how to fight fair, and resolving issues?" That's a really good question, a really deep question. Okay, here's one thing. When it comes to having disagreements, me and my wife have had many disagreements, heated fellowship, we like to call it. And when it comes to disagreements, one of the first things I would say is you have to have a conversation before the argument about how you're going to handle the argument. Because there are going to be times where it's not a good time to talk and try to solve the problem right then and there while you both are heated. And so these kind of conversations have to happen way beforehand, before any arguments come. For me and my wife, when it comes to arguments or, having heated discussions, one of the things we do is, number one, we try not to insult one another, because sometimes you can get so mad that you just want the other person to feel as hurt as you are. And you'll say something that you really don't mean, and it's not really productive. So one of the things I say is, number one, shut up and be quiet for a little while. Don't just jump into the argument. For me, and since it kind of fits in, Leonard Suggs says, let me see. He said, "What are your thoughts on going to bed arguing or not going to bed angry?" I'm guessing that's what you're meaning. Here's the thing. It's easy to say that, but there are going to be times where you will go to bed angry. But I would say not to, right? To actually have the discussion, right? The scripture says, right? Don't let the sun go down upon your wrath, so forth and so on. And, try to have these real discussions. And when it comes to, let me see, I'm trying to give you guys a good, okay. So don't go to bed angry, but try to resolve it within that same day. But also try not to argue while you're in the heat of the moment. And sometimes you may need to sleep. Sometimes, believe it or not, sometimes even after you have an argument, and let's say it's late and you don't have time to kind of walk through it, and sometimes sleeping can help, right? There's times where I went to bed angry, but then I woke up and I was feeling better. But the thing is, I always want you to take into consideration that may be the last day you get to see your spouse, and that will kind of rectify things really quickly if you think along those lines of, what if she doesn't wake up tomorrow? What if he doesn't wake up tomorrow? Is this argument worth it? And of course, it's not. Okay, hopefully I answered that question. If I didn't, make sure you guys put it in the comments, say, hey man, straighten it up. Okay, let me see. Waywo says, what would be one of the most misunderstood things those who are not yet married may have about marriage? There's a bunch of things. I'll give you this. If you're an individual, let's just say, because we all come from the world in a sense, and we all have different struggles. So like, for example, if you're an individual who has struggled with, let's say lust, right? And let's say you're the individual who maybe watched pornography or something like that, and now that's your view of sex. Well, that's not what sex is in marriage, right? Whatever you see on that screen is not real. It's a cheap imitation, right? And I think a lot of people don't like talking about that because it's a sensitive topic, right? Individuals who've struggled with pornography, or maybe have had multiple sexual partners, and they have a distorted view of sex. So that's one thing that I think most unmarried people are going to walk into marriage thinking that that's going to solve the problem. Also, for example, let's say a person's dealing with lust, right? And one of the things they think is when you get married, the lust problem disappears, right? That's not true, right? Now, what happens is now you're going to find yourself struggling between lust and your wife, and you're going to have all kinds of problems. The problem has to be rectified before marriage, right? The best you can, right? And you're going to have to struggle and wrestle with that and things like that. So one of the things I would suggest before even thinking about getting married is having a solid relationship with Christ for yourself, right? Because a lot of the times what ends up happening is we try to find value in another person, that person to validate us. I'm going to tell you right now that that person is not going to make you happy. They can't. Now, they can do things that kind of provoke that happiness in you, but they can't ultimately make you happy, right? Because they're flawed too. They're going to make you angry. They're going to make you upset. And so one of the things I would say is make sure that you kind of keep things in perspective. Marriage is not the solution to problems. Marriage is a gift. Marriage is wonderful. I love being married. I guess maybe I should talk a little bit about my story and how I got married so you guys can see where I'm coming from. So like when it comes to marriage, I was married at the age of 22, right? I met my wife and I got married at 22. Here's the cool thing. About 5 to 6 months prior to our first date, we were friends. We had conversations. I was attracted to her. She was attracted to me. We would sit down and talk, right? And so we were friends. So about 5 or 6 months later, we had our first date, August 5th, right? And then after our first date, I'll tell you a little bit about the first date. And this is maybe something good for the fellas, right? I took my wife to Six Flags on our first date. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's crazy. There's a lot of conversation that's happening. Because remember, you're getting on lines for a long period of time. You're having to conversate. It's not like going to the movies and having dinner is cool. But I think, when you're going to the movie, let's say for about 2.5 hours, let's say the movie's about that long, you're not having a conversation really. You're just watching a screen. And then maybe you're having dinner, but then you're eating. So in between, you're not really getting to have like real long conversation. So I took my wife to Six Flags. And every time we got on a line, we had about 30, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on the line, to just talk and conversate. And we had a really good time. I made a lot of jokes. She laughed a whole lot. She made a lot of jokes. I laughed really hard. And we really got to know one another. So August 5th was our first date. needless to say, October 29th, we got married. So not very long after that, right? So August 5th and then September, October 29th, we got married. And we've been married for, again, about 16 years. And so if we make it this year, right, as if we're both alive, right, on October 29th of this year, we would have been married for 17 years. Now, I'm 38 years old, so I've been married for a good chunk of my life, and I've enjoyed every year of it. It doesn't feel like I've been married for a long time at all. I truly, truly love being married to my wife, and she's been wonderful. But that does not mean that we haven't had our arguments and disagreements. As a matter of fact, the first month we got married was really hard because I was coming from a background of being an ex-Hebrew Israelite. She was coming from a background of being coming from the Word of Faith movement. We had disagreements in scriptures. This is kind of like those growing pains because I did things a certain way, she did things a certain way, and it was really rough. And I remember we got into such a heated argument that I thought it was going to be over. Like we were like angry. And I remember us sitting down and just having a kind of heart-to-heart talk. And for example, like we sat down and the first thing we said was, we can't let this marriage just kind of be thrown away. We made a dedication before the Lord and before each other. So let's make this work. And I kid you not, after that month, it was smooth sailing. Not that we never had a disagreement again or never had an argument, but it was like we grounded our relationship in Christ. We made a vow before God. So I just want you guys to know, especially if you're brand new, that you're going to have difficulties in your marriage. You're going to have times where you're like, oh man, I just can't take it anymore. But if you push past that, right, just like in life, if you push past those difficult circumstances, you find that there is a beauty you would have missed had you just given up. The people in today's world, they take marriage as something that you just throw away if it just doesn't, it's not perfect. And individuals, and you know what, I'm getting into some of the questions. So let me let me actually go through some of these questions real quick because I'm actually answering some of them without giving you guys the questions. So those are some of the things that people misunderstand, that it's always going to be smooth sailing and that it's going to be maybe like what you see on TV, right? When it comes to, intimacy and things like that. It's not. It's better. It's much better, but you just have to have the right perspective. Okay. So another question from Waywo. She says, what happens if a long-term married couple runs into uncharted territory by way of intimacy being lost, or maybe feeling as though the spark has died? This is a common question I have been asked by long-term married couples. What key steps could a married couple take to ensure they deal directly with these sensitive topics head on without straying or even being tempted to stray? Very good question. Very deep question. Okay, so I'm going to break it down slowly. So the first part of your question is, what happens if a long-term married couple runs into uncharted territory by way of intimacy being lost? So one of the things that works in my relationship, yes, we are intimate. Yes, we love each other. We're attracted to one another and it works out great, but not every marriage is going to be like that. Now, there are going to be times in your marriage where the intimacy is not there. So what are you going to do? Number one, you have to take into consideration that the person that you've married is a person. They have ups, they have downs, and they want to be loved. That's the ultimate thing between two people. Now, how they receive that love is completely different. Like, for example, Roxby asked about the 5 love languages in one of the questions. And so I'll talk a little bit about these. And this is a basic, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5, how to communicate and all that stuff. So I'll kind of talk about, here are my love languages. Let me talk about that a little bit. My love language is words of affirmation and physical touch. But what does that mean, right? So we'll talk about the words of affirmation. Encourage, affirm, appreciate, empathize, and listen actively. So for example, I love it when my wife encourages me. It really picks me up. It really gives me the drive to just push past any difficulty. So that's how I receive love. So anytime my wife says words of affirmation, then that's how I feel love from her. Physical touch, there's really no explanation in that. I'm a physical person. So I'll read it for you guys. Nonverbal, use body language and touch to express love. Examples of this would be like to hug, kiss, hold hands, show physical affection often, and make intimacy a thoughtful priority. So making intimacy a thoughtful priority is important for me. I love physical touch. I love to hug my wife. I love to kiss my wife. And that's how I show love. But the thing is, what you have to learn is that the way you show love shouldn't reflect how you feel love, right? So for example, my wife, I would say, and if maybe one day my wife could get on here with me and we could have like a real cool conversation with you guys. I would say my wife's love language would be quality time and acts of service. Like, for example, so when it comes to acts of service, it's not talking about slavery, right? It's talking about, like, for example, I'll help. My wife loves it when I help, when I step in and I help her, and she feels love that way. If I try to always show affection with physical touch, then her way of receiving love is not that way. So it'll be difficult for her to really feel that love. And for example, they want to know you're with them or partnered with them. My wife is a big advocate of, let's do this together. Let's make it through the difficult situations together as a family, or, me and her, because we don't have any kids. But how can we get through that together? For example, doing chores together, or make breakfast in bed, or go out of your way to alleviate their daily workload. My wife loves it when I help her around the house. And so how do I show my love to her? I show my love to her in that way. Quality time, creating special moments. My wife loves quality time. She loves to talk. She loves to conversate. She loves to, find out what's going on inside my head. So I try to show love that way to her. And and vice versa. She does words of affirmation and physical touch. Let's see. Okay. So that's kind of that. Okay. So the other part of the question was, so what do you do when the spark is lost? Don't lose the spark. Try your very best not to lose the spark. Always be attracted to your spouse, and remember why you were attracted to her in the first place. One of the things you can do to kind of keep that spark alive is to go on dates. Me and my wife, we have a date night every Friday night. We spend quality time together. Now, that does not mean that you have to go out on an expensive date or anything like that. It just means that you're setting aside time to be with one another, and to, whether it's watching a movie, hanging out, laughing. The more you get to know your spouse, the more it keeps the spark alive. If you're in the type of marriage where it's separate and you guys don't do anything together, well, of course you're going to lose interest. It's the same way like when you're trying to have a deep relationship with God. If you never spend time in prayer, if you never spend time in your word, you're never going to have a good relationship with the Lord. It's always going to be this distant thing. And it's the same with marriage, right? If you leave from being with one another, then you're going to grow distant, and temptation enters in those weak moments, right? So, and I think this is kind of along the lines of your other question. It says, this is the comment. It said, what key steps could a married couple take? I think I gave you some to ensure they deal directly with these sensitive topics head on without straying or even being tempted to stray. One thing I definitely want to talk about, and as far as when it comes to marriage, is this idea of neglecting your spouse sexually, right? Let me tell you what happens when you do that, okay? When you do that, you open up the door for temptation, right? So it doesn't mean that if you're not feeling good, you just, I'm saying, of course, be responsible, right? For husbands, if your wife is not feeling well, don't be some kind of barbaric guy and say, well, you're not supposed to reject. You don't do that, right? That's not love, right? God doesn't force himself on you, so don't force yourself on your wife, all right? But when it comes to marriage, like if your wife is not feeling good, that's an opportunity to show her love, acts of service, right? Because then the intimacy after that, when she feels great, it's going to be wonderful, right? Because she knows that you love her and care for her. You're not looking at her as just a sexual object. And the same thing for husbands. Now, with wives, one of the things that you don't want to do is weaponize your sexuality or your body and say that every time he doesn't do something you like, you just say, well, I'm just not going to have sex with him. Here's what you're doing, and here's the problem. You're putting your spouse in a position to be tempted. This doesn't mean that the spouse has permission to go and live and go astray, but you cannot weaponize sex or sexuality, and think that there's not going to be any repercussions, right? A person will be tempted. This is why Scripture says your body doesn't belong to you, and not to reject your spouse unless it's agreed for a certain period of time, right? You both agree, well, I'm going to fast and pray. Okay, cool. Once that agreement is made, then it's okay. But when there's no agreement, right? This is another kind of aspect when you think about it. It's along the lines of you're not yourself anymore. It's not just about you anymore when you're married. It's about your spouse. One of the questions that were asked in this woke community chat a while back was, should a husband ask permission before he shaves his face? Here's the thing. if your wife, like my wife likes it when I have facial hair. All right. I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me either. But if I was going to shave, I would ask her, hey, it's okay. And it doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, I can't do anything without asking my wife. You're taking your spouse into consideration, right? You're saying, okay, she likes my beard. And so that makes her attracted to me. Why would I just shave it off if it brings her pleasure? And the same thing with the wife, right? I think you should both have conversations as to changing your appearance with one another. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do what they say. It just means you have to be considerate with one another on those things. And again, you don't want, hopefully I answered the question as far as, and Weibo, you just let me know if I have. Let me see. What key steps could a married couple take to ensure they deal directly with these sensitive topics head on? So definitely you want to talk about sex before marriage, believe it or not. This doesn't mean you are actively engaging in things, but I'm saying is you want to have that conversation with a person even before you get married. Is like, you know, what does sex mean to you, right? You want to get that answer from the person, excuse me, because you want to know where their head's at. And then you, if there's an issue, now you have an opportunity to kind of deal with that. Like, okay, like I'm this kind of person, or I'm that kind of person. This is why it's so important that when you're dating or when you're getting to know one another, that the first thing has to be like, this is my belief is that if you're dating someone, let's say you on the first date, I think is the best time to say, listen, I'm interested in you. I find you attractive, but my ultimate mission or my ultimate purpose for going on dates is to be married. That's my focus. And so I think that it's very important that be, and there's not going to be any no sexual conduct or anything like that. That has to be stated out front at the beginning. That way, the other person doesn't have any false expectations, and you also hold your ground. All right. So hopefully I answered the question. Okay. So Weiwo says, is there a way to fight fair during arguments in marriage? If so, how? Does the Bible mention much on the topic of conflict in marriage? Believe it or not, it talks about it not necessarily in those terms, but just dealing with people in general, right? So for example, is there a way to fight fair during arguments? Yes. Number one, your whole aim shouldn't be to hurt the person's feelings. You shouldn't be out there trying to just break them. It should always be toward how can we do this together? How can we work as a team? And you have to constantly reinforce that, because sometimes during an argument, the other person feels as if you're attacking them, right? But you have to reinforce saying, listen, I'm not attacking you. I love you and I want to work this out, and I want it for the best of both of us. And once they understand that, right? It may take time depending on the person's personality. It may take time. But you definitely want to make sure you're doing it in love. So I would say that's how the best way is to deal with the issues without trying to make it personal. And it's hard, right? It's hard sometimes. Let me see. Let me answer one of these that are on here. Let me see. We got one. True story. That's why unhealthy baggage should be dealt with head on before marriage. Yes, that's true. Whether it's debt, I think that's something that needs to be spoken about. Sexuality, sexual drives, expectations. Those things need to be talked about. Let me see. It's true. It's a deeper love that develops as time goes on. It's absolutely true. Me and my wife have grown over these past 16 years more in love with each other. We do not feel, it feels like it's only been about 2 to 3 years that we've been married, because it's still exciting. We still love each other. And I don't attribute that to our effort. I attribute that to Christ. Once we anchored our relationship in Christ, it really changed how we look at each other and how we grow with one another. So one thing I could offer as advice is make sure you anchor your relationship in Christ from the beginning. Somebody else said, it's funny, I've never actually met your wife, and yet I can see a mile off that your love for her is out of this world. It's tangible. I can tell that yours and your wife's union is precious. It is. Man, I can't tell you. This will be about 3-hour conversation if I tell you all the reasons I love my wife, man. I just can't. It's amazing, and the thing is, it's had its ups and downs, because of the circumstances of how we got together and everything that I lost to be with her. But man, I can't tell you, I would not change a thing. I would not change a thing about our marriage. She's the most wonderful woman in the world. Let me see. Somebody else said, every person has different sex drives, so talking about each other's expectations is key. That's absolutely true. Roxby says, what are practical ways to work on showing love in a way that doesn't come easily? Let me see. Okay, a way to show love. Like for me, one of the things I do, which I hate, is, well, I don't hate it. Like, for example, during dinner time, my wife makes dinner or I make dinner. It depends on, what the cravings are, right? I make certain things that she likes and she makes certain things I like. But anyway, dinner is made. And the first thing I like to do is after dinner is grab a snack and sit down and watch TV. What I do to show her that love is I don't do that. I go and I wash the dishes, right? Something as simple as that. And say, hey, Michelle, just go ahead and you sit down, you relax, right? These are small acts of kindness that you can do. For her, what she does is she'll make me a favorite meal, or she'll sit down and she'll watch a movie that at first she's not interested in, but she knows that I like. So she'll sit down and watch, what I like. She ends up liking it because I like all cool movies, right? No, but in all honesty, there are things that I know that she watches that she doesn't necessarily, like as much as I do, but she sits with me and watches it with me to spend that quality time and to laugh and joke around and all that good stuff. And vice versa. I don't like watching HGTV. My wife's a professional interior designer, by the way. And she loves watching, what other people do and things like that on HGTV. I can't stand those shows. They drive me crazy. But I'll sit down and watch it with her and engage, not just sit there and but engage and, talk and, and if I find that it ends up being really interesting conversations that pop out of that. And for women, if your man is a person who likes, touch, I'm talking about husband and wives, not dating, not boyfriend, girlfriend type stuff. I'm talking about husband and wives. If you're not husband and wife, you shouldn't be having any physical, sexual intimacy. Okay. But, for example, so if you think about it, like for wives, if your husband's love language is physical touch, make an active effort to show him affection, whether it's hugs and kisses, whether it's full on intimacy, whatever it is. Make an active effort to show him that you love him and that he matters, right? Because if his love language is physical touch and you don't touch him, he's going to feel what? Like you don't love him. And so then he's not going to want to do things to love you. So, it's a give and take, right? It's you show the person love in the way they receive love and they'll show you. And then when you do that, you got the intimacy is better. The quality time is better. So just take that into consideration. Another question, what should a Christian man or woman do if they waited and waited for God to reveal the one, and time is getting away, especially childbearing age? Man, I could make a whole show on that. I want to answer this responsibly. So there are going to be situations where childbearing is going to come into play. There are a lot of people who have gotten married just for that, right? Oh, I got to have kids at a certain time. And if I don't get married at this certain time, then my eggs are going to disappear. And so there's a lot of things going into that. And so number one, don't get married for the purpose of having kids. Now, it's a good thing. It's part of the marriage. It's something that the Lord wants as far as fruitful, if that's in your DNA, because sometimes people just can't have kids. So does that mean they shouldn't get married? No, right? Because there are other benefits, but that's one of the benefits. I want you to look at having kids as one of the benefits of marriage. So I wouldn't make childbearing age a necessity for being married. Because what ends up happening, like, for example, if you make that, let's just say you make that a priority. Let's say, well, I need to have kids at a certain age and I need to get married. But what if you get married and he can't have kids, right? There's something, physically, wrong with him that he can't have kids. What if all of a sudden there's something where you can't have kids? So getting married for the purpose of having kids is not responsible. But it's a good thing. And it's something that does come from marriage. Like me and my wife, we don't have any kids. So, but you can tell I love my wife. I love being with her. If we never have kids ever, I would never have traded all these years I spent with my wife. Never. I would not trade a day, right? Because that's not my priority, right? It doesn't mean that we don't want kids. It just means that that's not the priority, right? We're trying to also be reflectors of God in the world. There are many married couples who are very happy who've never had kids, right? Whether it was, and that's another thing you have to talk about, right? Like I'm thinking about it right now as I speak. Another thing to talk about is, hey, listen, when you're having the conversation, when you're first dating, that's a conversation you have, right? If it's important for the wife or for the woman, say, hey, listen, I want kids. Is that a priority for you? Is that something that you don't want? And if he says, no, I don't want kids, well, then that lets you know that that's not a person for you. Now, of course, like I said before, it shouldn't be the only thing, but if that's important to you and the other person has no interest in that, that's something that you're going to have to either acknowledge and say, well, okay, this person doesn't want kids, so I'm going to have to deal with that, or, vice versa. So hopefully I answered that in a good way. Again, this is off the cuff. I'm trying to give you guys honest, good answers. There's so much I want to talk about, but as far as like my personal experience, but I'm going to hold back a little bit because I want to really deal with your questions. So again, yeah, don't marry just for kids, because things can change. Things can change in a heartbeat. You can't control the future. Let's see. Let me see. Okay. How do couples come together with handling their money wisely if they have different priorities? One wants to save for retirement and the other really wants to travel early on while they have the money time well before retirement. Okay. So now you have two individuals who, and this is interesting because me and my wife have the same priorities. So it's not hard for us to kind of, we don't have to compromise a whole lot because we have the same priorities. But there are times where I want to go and do something. She's like, oh, we should save. My wife is the saver and I like to save, but I like to experience life as well. So for example, I think you should do both. I think if you put all of your money and time into retirement, I think it's a waste of your life. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying that if that's the only thing you do with all your money and you never go out and experience anything, then you're wasting your life. Because number one, you don't know if you're going to live to retirement, right? You don't know if you're going to make it to that age to even enjoy the things that you saved. So I think you need to split it right down the middle, 50-50. Say, hey, listen, let's have some time where we do some really good things and experiences, and let's also save. I think both needs to be done. So let me see. So yeah. So again, yes, it's very important. Me and my wife, we save a lot, right? We don't spend a lot of money on frivolous things, right? We only spend it on what we need. Me and my wife, we have these conversations sometime and we say things like, we don't spend money for 2-3 years, but then when we do, we spend a lot at once, like, for experiences. Like for me, I don't mind, I don't buy a lot of clothes. I just have what I need and I'm fine. I'm not a person who really needs a lot of things. But if I do buy clothes, I'll buy it all at once. So I'll buy like 7-8 pair of jeans, 5-10 shirts, 3, 4, 5 hoodies, and I buy it all at once. And then I won't buy for another 2-3 years, right? Like that's how I am. But again, make sure you guys spend quality time doing things in life because you don't know how long each other's going to live. You don't know, kind of along the lines of, how things are going to be. So enjoy the moment, but also prepare. So that's my answer. Do both in moderation, right? You don't want to do anything to the extreme. Let's see. The next question that I got was, what things should couples definitely discuss before tying the knot? That is, what things should not be left to chance, non-negotiable stuff. Okay. The first thing is who you worship. You cannot, as a Christian, you cannot get into a relationship with somebody of another religion. Okay. And when I say religion, I'm talking about another faith completely. I'm not talking about like if somebody's a Christian and they're charismatic and then another person's a Christian and they're Baptist. That's okay. But we're talking about in general. For example, Christians should not enter into covenant relationships with individuals who are not of the same faith. Period. Reason being is because it's going to cause confusion and it's going to be hard, right? Number two, talk about debt. Are you carrying debt? Because it's going to fall on both of you. You know, I don't care if you have separate bank accounts. It's going to fall on both. And if the other person's okay with the fact that you have debt, then that's fine. But if they're not okay with it, this is why these conversations need to be had. So those are two things. And of course, so faith and finances are things you should definitely talk about before tying the knot. You should get to know a charismatic Christian with a cessationist or Calvinist could be trash. It could be, but that's funny. That's funny. Okay. So, that is what things should not be left to chance. So those are the two things I think should not be left to chance. Also, try to get to know the person's family if it gets to that point. And because you're going to actually have to engage with the family on a constant basis. So make sure that you can have a very loving relationship with the family. Okay. So I think those are the three things that pop in my head right now. If something comes up, I'll make sure to mention it. Okay. The next question, let me see. Here we go. This is a good, interesting one. We obviously meet a lot of fellow Christians of the opposite sex along our journey as a couple. What boundaries should be set in relation to how to relate to those of the opposite sex? Okay, as a Christian, you should not engage in any physicality. I'm not saying you can't hold hands. What I'm saying is anything that, kissing and making out and of course, sexual relations, that kind of stuff. I think hugs need to be a certain way. You shouldn't be full on, on top of each other, hugging each other, because that's going to arouse temptation. The Christian side hug and things like that. Everything should be appropriate. And so one of the things that's one of the things you should definitely keep in that's a boundary. So that needs to be a line drawn right there in the sand. So let me see how to relate to those of the opposite sex. I think, one thing I definitely want to talk about is individuals who date a lot of people, right? Or you're getting to know a lot of people. So one of the things I would say is, number one, I would date one person at a time if I were you, right? That's my advice to you. Don't date 5, 10 people because your attention is going to be divided. Now, what I would say is you date that one person. If it doesn't work out or, you guys are getting to know each other and it doesn't work out, then that's fine. Then you stop. And then, you're open to another opportunity. But I believe wholeheartedly that a person shouldn't be dating multiple people because your attention is divided and you're not going to be able to focus. And, it's going to create a lot of problems, right? Jealousy can come up and things like that. So that's one thing I would say. Make sure you one person at a time. Okay, let's see. Next question. All right. Are you guys getting value from this? I just want to know some feedback. Are you guys getting value from this conversation? If so, just go ahead and let me know in the comments section so I make sure I didn't lose anybody. Let's see. Let me see. Okay, hopefully I answered. Let me see, Roxby. What kind of boundaries should there be? You should not have any physical intimacy with anybody. I'm sorry. What kind of boundaries should there be in the types of conversations between friends of the opposite sex? Okay, so me and my wife, right? This may not be everybody, but me and my wife, early on, like within the first 3 months of the marriage, we made a pact with one another. And we said that we are not going to have best friends of the opposite sex. So I don't have a best female friend. She doesn't have a best male friend. The reason we did that and the reason we made that decision was to not open up the door to temptation, right? A lot of people think that, I can handle it. The thing is, when you have because let's say you have a best friend, right? Let's say I had a best female friend, right? Let's just say I had a female friend. My wife would kill me if I did, but let's say I have a best female friend and I share everything with her, right? I share all my difficulties, all my shortcomings. What happens is, believe it or not, you will build intimacy that way, right? And that person will be the person that you go to. So let's say there's an opportunity where, let's say your wife did something that made you mad. And then I'm like, oh, I can't talk to her, but I can talk to my female friend. All you're doing is opening up the opportunity for Satan to walk in and tempt you. So me personally, I don't have any female friends at all. Me personally, I'm female friends in the sense that I don't confide in my female friends. I have friends and brothers and sisters in Christ, but I don't have any friend, like deep friends, like best friendships. My best friend is my wife. I talk to my wife about everything, about all my fears, about everything I deal with, all my difficulties. She is my best friend. And she will tell you without a shadow of a doubt that I am her best friend. She confides in me. So me personally, Leonard, let me see. So I can't have the bodega ladies as my best friend. LOL. You know what I mean when I say best friends. You know what I mean? Like close, intimate friendships that you confide. No, I think it needs to be limited. And that's my opinion. You know, not everybody may feel that way. I think it's the safest thing, right? Let me see. It says, if I'm speaking to any member of the opposite sex in message, I have accountability by always sharing that I'm doing so with my husband. Nothing is hidden. Well, then that's okay, right? Nothing is hidden. But just be careful anyway. It's cool that, okay, I'm not saying you can't have a friend, or I'm talking about you guys. Hopefully I'm trying to make it very clear. Like, for example, I'm friends with the bodega ladies, right? You got Michelle Turner, you know, Miss Titus 2, Shawnee Miller, and so forth and so on, right? And so we talk, we joke and stuff like that. But I'm not going to call them and confide about my deepest, darkest issues or the things that I deal with. That's my best friend, my wife. She gets that part of me. So don't share that part of you with anybody else. So, somebody said, don't be telling anyone anything you wouldn't say in front of your spouse. That's true. Leonard, he says, I know what you mean, but I agree with you. Okay, cool. I'm glad you got it. I'm just making sure I'm clear. So cool. I'm glad you got it. All right. So, let me see. I'm looking at the other questions. And if you guys have any personal questions you want to ask me, I mean, this is the place where you can ask any kind of questions. So don't be afraid. Make sure you guys put it in the chat. I'm trying my very best to make myself available to you all. Let me see. How much time, energy, money should realistically be spent on the wedding? Here we go. And how involved should each be in those decisions? Okay. This is really cool. So how much time and money? Number one, it's a day. Do not go in debt for a wedding. It's one day. As a matter of fact, and this is both hard and this is a blessing for me to share. When me and my wife first got married, right, we were setting up the wedding in New Orleans. And unfortunately, Hurricane Katrina came and wiped everything out. And we had put the deposits down because we believe in not having debt. So we put all the money down, we finished, we paid for everything, and then Hurricane Katrina came and wiped everything away. So we weren't able to have an actual wedding, which is heartbreaking because my wife, if any woman on earth deserves a wedding, it's my wife. But we didn't have one, unfortunately. So we got married. And we took that money, instead of spending it on and we were very responsible with the money because it was going to be paid off. So I'll say this, if you can't pay off your wedding, maybe you should reset your priorities, because what's more important, that one day of celebration or, marriage in the future? Like, for example, you have a house, you need to buy a home, you need food, you need clothing, you need these kind of things. And so I would say is if you can't pay off your wedding, then you need to rethink what you're doing in the wedding. You can have a beautiful celebration, right? You could have it in the backyard, have all your friends come over, have this celebrate, and you would have just as much fun as if you spent thousands of dollars, on the dress of your dreams. I'm not saying women you should have your dress if you can have it, you know what I mean? But what's more important is that moment with each other, that you're being married to your spouse. That's what's most important. And then have some people come over. Don't go into debt for marriage. Okay. It's not necessary, because me and my wife have a wonderful marriage and we never had a wedding. In my heart, I want to have a wedding with my wife, but right now we haven't had one, and our marriage hasn't suffered as a result of that, right? Our marriage has grown. We grew stronger because we didn't have to have all that stuff to say, okay, I love her. Everything I do, the way I walk with her, the way I talk with her, and the way she acts with me, that's marriage. Right. And the Lord, right? The Lord being the priority. Somebody said, can you do this regularly, Jordan? Yeah, I would love to. If you want me to do this regularly, I will. You guys can actually send me questions, or if you want me to talk about a certain topic, I don't mind doing it. I wanted to make myself available to you guys today, and I wanted to make sure that that when you're getting into marriage, that you're thinking about these things. It's important, right? It's very important, because now for husbands out there, right, you are responsible for your wife. You're very responsible. For example, when I entered into marriage with my wife, my thought process was, Lord, help me to show her how much you love her, right? That was my priority when we first got together, is because I wanted my wife to fall in love with the Lord. I wanted her to be enamored with God. And because of that, I try to treat her in a way that God would treat her, right? And that's hard, because I'm not God. I make mistakes. I fall short. I get mad. I get angry. I'm greedy sometimes. I have shortcomings. But in the back of my mind, in my heart of hearts, my goal is always to make sure that she sees God rightly through my behavior and treatment of her. This is why God always relates the church to his bride, right? The same way that he sacrificed himself for us, for our well-being, we as husbands need to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for the betterment of our wife. Even if it means watching those boring TV shows, even if it means going to a restaurant that she likes but you hate, make that sacrifice, because your marriage is going to be better for it. Let me see. Let's do marriage Mondays. I don't know if I could do every Monday, right? Because I got real reviews on Mondays, and I prepare and I do a lot of studying. If I can, I'll try to. I don't want to promise anything, but I will try to do something maybe bi-weekly, like every 2 weeks, and if I can, maybe, do a little quick little thing, once a week. If I can do it, I will. But I need your guys' support. So if you want to support the ministry in any way, and it'll help me to be able to spend more time doing these things, you can go to patreon.com/Servant of Christ Ministries, and you can donate monthly and help the ministry grow. And I can do a lot more things and dedicate a lot more time. So if that's one way you want to help the ministry grow, you guys can do that. But you don't have to. I'm going to help out anyway, any way I can. All right. Let me see another question. What are some things you learned about marriage on the back end that you hadn't considered prior to marriage? That is really cool. What are some things I learned? Let me think. That all your problems aren't going to be solved with marriage. I wish I would have known that it takes really hard work. I mean, you hear the phrase, it takes hard work to maintain a good marriage, but it's really hard. It's difficult to die to yourself and to sacrifice yourself on a daily basis. Absolutely is hard. Because you're going to have issues, right? You're going to have issues come up. There are going to be things that your wife wants to do and you don't want to do. And you're going to have to struggle with whether or not you're going to make that sacrifice and do it. And vice versa, the wife as well. So one thing I wish I would have known is that it really takes really hard work, and there's a lot of sacrifice involved, right? Because sometimes when we get married to satisfy a need, right? Whether that be physical, personal, spiritual, right? We feel an emptiness, right? And if we rely on that person to be the only source of what satisfies us, you're going to be disappointed a whole lot, all right? Because they fall short as well. So that's a great question. So thank you for that question. Hopefully I answered it well. One last question from me. My husband and I are on different stages of our Christian walk. How do I encourage him more? Be a good wife. Be a loving wife. Be a caring wife. And don't allow his shortcomings. I don't know who's on what level, right? I don't know who's more mature, who's more immature in Christ. It doesn't matter, right? I can't think of the scripture right offhand, but let me see. Give me a moment. Let me think. Okay, here we go. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 16. All right, this is something that I would advise. It says, how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? So go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 16. So here is, if I'm going to make that just a quick synopsis of it, I would say, number one, your behavior can influence him to grow in Christ more, or him or her, right? Depending on who's the one who needs to grow. And so you should always not look at your husband or wife as less than, but rather to be, you know what, I have an opportunity here to be a servant of Christ and actually help them grow. I have to be a good example to them. They need to see that you care, and that you take your Christian walk seriously. I guarantee that they will start looking at you and saying, wow, why is she like this? She's nice to me. She's caring. She's loving. You have to be a good example to your spouse. Hands down. You definitely have to be. So my husband and I are at different stages. I'm just making sure I'm answering your question. My husband and I are at different stages of our Christian walk. How do I encourage him more? And again, showing him love and respect and honoring him as your husband. Believe it or not, that hits the ego of a husband huge, right? When my wife asks me, Jay, is it okay if I do this? Not that she has to, but the fact that she gives priority to what I think is enough for me to invest, because I'm like, wow, she actually thinks I'm important enough to trust with a decision, right? Do not belittle your husband or do not belittle your wife. Don't make them feel less than because maybe they're not as mature in the walk. You have to still honor your husband and honor your wife, either way. So hopefully I answered that question well. If I haven't, just let me know in the comments. Let me see what else we got here. How do you handle feeling rejected by your spouse? That's rough. Okay, let's talk from a purely physical perspective. Let's say you have a husband and wife. The husband, his love language is physical touch, but the wife is not, and she rejects him. I want to tell you the impact that has on a man. And it's the same thing for a woman, but it has on a man as well. When you reject your spouse, physically, what you're telling him is that I don't desire you. You're not attractive. This is how he translates it. And so now he feels less than a man. So if you're rejecting your husband, let's say out of spite, oh, he made you angry, and you just reject him. I don't want to have sex with you tonight. I don't want to be intimate with you. What you're doing is you're killing your husband slowly, right? Don't do that to your husband. And wives, right? And husbands, don't do that to your wife either, right? Don't say, well, I'm never going to have a romantic evening with you because you didn't do what I want. You're killing your wife. So I want you guys to think along those lines when it comes to making sure that you are not rejecting. And that's hard. It's hard to handle that, right? And so how would you feel if your mother just stopped showing you love, or your father just stopped loving you? It's the same in a marriage, right? It's even more in a marriage. So I would say don't do that. Don't reject for the sake of rejecting. But how do you handle it when you're feeling rejected? In those moments when you feel rejected, don't respond with negativity, but rather go to the Lord in prayer, because he's not going to reject you. All right. Every time you go to the Lord, he does not reject you. He's always there for you, and he's always going to be there. So go to the Lord in prayer and ask him to help you deal with this circumstance in the moment, and then build that relationship together. And then let them know how you felt. I know it's hard. It's hard for a guy to say, man, I feel rejected. I feel bad. I feel like you don't love me. I feel like I'm not attractive to you anymore. And it's hard to deal with that, but you have to talk about that with your spouse so they know, right? And so they understand that what they've done hurt you. If that's not the case, if you don't do that, then they'll never know. So you have to have that conversation. It looks like that's it. It looks like I ran through all the questions. If you guys have any questions, make sure you put it in the chat for me. I'm going to be looking around. Hopefully I've answered all of your questions. If not, we could just end it right here. Somebody said, this has been fantastic, Jordan. Truly, thank you. I'm glad that this is helpful. And I promise to try to come on here more and just offer my advice and my wisdom and my experience to you guys, so you guys can grow and actually look at marriage from a different perspective than, the world. And so again, I want to encourage people out there. If you're looking for a spouse, it was hard for me because when I was asking the Lord for a wife, and it took years, and it was hard, and especially with everything that happened in the past. So I know what it is to want a spouse and wait. But I would say this, strive with the same veracity that you're striving for a marriage, strive 5 times more for a relationship with the Lord. The more you build that relationship with the Lord, the easier it will become to wait or to be patient. If you're not spending time with God and your whole mind is fixated on, I want to be married, 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 then you're always going to be depressed and it's going to magnify itself in your life, and then God is going to diminish. But if you expand God, if you expand your time in your relationship with him, then and only then will you be able to handle that time that you have to wait and be patient, because the Lord is going to provide a husband or a wife for you, right? The Lord sees that, for example, there are some people who are given to the fact that they don't have to be married and they're okay, but not everybody's like that. And the Lord knows that not everybody's like that. So he knows that he's going to provide somebody for you, but sometimes he has to grow you, right? He has to help you mature, right? The same way that you ask the Lord to prepare a spouse for you, you should ask the Lord to prepare you for your spouse. And it's going to take time. It's going to take time. Okay. With that said, I'm just waiting to see if anybody comes up with any last minute questions. I don't want to leave anybody out. If you guys, I'll talk a little bit. If you guys do me a favor, if you guys go over to youtube.com/Servant of Christ Ministries, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Got a lot of really cool Bible studies over there. And I go live every Saturday night live with my brother in Christ, Chris Brian Samuel. We're actually walking through the book of Romans. We're in Romans chapter 12. There's a playlist. So we're actually walking through the whole book. I think it's very beneficial. And then, of course, I have a Real Reviews channel. And I don't have the link in front of me. Let me see if I can get it. I'll drop it in the chat. You know what? I'll just put it under this this post on Facebook. I'll put all my links, how you can contact me and all that good stuff. And if you want to send questions to me about marriage, if you have questions like that, you can send it over to servantofchristministries@gmail.com. And let me see, we've got one more. Agreed, keep seeking the kingdom. God will provide. Amen. So without further ado, hopefully I've helped you guys out. And, you know, keep in touch. I'll try to keep in touch with you guys. So God bless, take care, and I will see you next time. All right. Follow Christ, follow Christ, follow Christ.